Hi, good evening. My name is Rainer. I'm a German booktuber living in Sweden and talking about books written in English or translated into English mostly. Today I will do a tag video, and of course, as you can see, my hat. Which country is it from? It's an original P, as in Panama hat. So I'm doing the P tag that was created by Jim at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. Let's get started with a piece. P is for porridge. What did you have for breakfast? I rarely eat porridge for breakfast, that I can tell you. And I'm not the biggest fan of what people would call a classic English, the original English breakfast with blood pudding and sausages and stuff and other delicious things. And today, on filming day of this video, which is Monday the 25th of October, today I had just a cup of coffee for breakfast, and then for lunch I actually ate something. I ate 2 German bread rolls for lunch, one with Spanish smoked ham and the other one with French cheese, but apparently I think it was French cheese that sort of was French cheese that was made here in Sweden. P is also for painter. Who is your favorite painter? I think I have said that already in one of the other prompt videos. There was a sort of a question that was going into the painter direction. My favorite painter is, maybe it is Edward Hopper, the American chronicle, how do you say, the American researcher of loneliness in the big city in the 1940s. I was also impressed very much a couple of years ago when I went to Humlebæk, which is outside Copenhagen in Denmark, north of Copenhagen actually. And there is a museum that is called Louisiana, like the American state. It's Louisiana and Humlebæk. And they had a super duper trooper exhibition of the German painter, which is actually as old as I am, Daniel Richter, at the wonderful side of that museum. If you ever come to Europe, folks, if you are not from Europe, and if you're going to Denmark, if you go to Copenhagen, please take the train to Louisiana, whatever exhibition they show. You will love the museum. It's one of the most beautiful museums I've ever seen in my life. There are some other great painters to discover. Everywhere you look around the world, there are great painters. But I have to admit that I have also a weakness. You know that I watch the videos of Bolton Bankrupt, right? And he has to do with the Soviet kind of stuff that he's always doing. I was also fascinated some years ago when I went to an exhibition at Liljevalchs Konsthall here in Stockholm, Sweden, which is very closely situated to the ABBA Museum on the island of Djurgården. And I saw an exhibition of Soviet art from the Soviet Union from, I don't remember actually, 1917 to probably 1991. And I saw this great exhibition. I'm going to show you a couple of paintings of Soviet art that is depicting the working life, that is depicting large gatherings, that also shows a little bit of the diversity of the country with the cotton in Uzbekistan, for example, or in Tajikistan. But it also is somehow, of course, questionable because it is the art of a dictatorship, of its propaganda in a lot of ways. P is also for police procedural. What is the last police procedural you read? The last one I read actually was a British Canadian novelist Peter Robinson's latest novel that is called Not Dark Yet, about his detective superintendent Alan Banks and the detective chief inspector, I think that's right, Annie Cabot, in the fictitious town of Eastville. That is something that I always pick up Robinson's new books. Banks tries finally to catch a man who tried to set him on fire some novels ago when he was having was a little drunk with this beautiful smoky Scottish whiskey called Lafroig, or whatever it's pronounced. And then his house was set on fire. And after that, actually, Banks cannot drink Lafroig anymore. It's really hard for him. P is for playlists. Have you created any YouTube playlists? I think, yes, I have, of course. Mostly music videos. But I also did one about Tokyo before traveling there. And I might have done others about the United States. And, well, I have done YouTube playlists, but I'm not a great playlist sort of keeper and watcher on YouTube. But I watch a lot of YouTube. P is for publisher. Do you have a favorite publisher? No, I don't think that I have a favorite publisher, but of course my heart goes out to the outsiders, to the small publishers in the world, to the independent publishers who have managed sort of to not being bought up by big companies like the German Bertelsmann, which has sort of bought the whole English-speaking book market almost. And I actually heard that another German company, publishing company, Axel Springer Verlag, which publishes the German newspaper, so-called newspaper Bild, is also gaining big things on the American market now by having bought Politico for $1 billion, and they're trying to get bigger. But this is in parentheses here. So I have a small publisher actually that I discovered just a couple of weeks ago when I bought the book Winter in Sakcho by the French-Korean writer Elisa Chua du Sapin. And this British publisher is called Daunt Books Publishing. They will soon come with another novel by Elisa Chua du Sapin. I think it's the first one that she wrote. It's called The Pachinko Parlor. And they have published beautiful books like A Sunday in Ville d'Avray by Dominique Barberis. They have published Map of Another Town by MFK Fisher about the small town of Aix-en-Provence or Aix-en-Provence in France, in France, and a book like A Cat, a Man, and Two Women by Junichiro Tanizaki, and lots of other really beautifully made books. And they all cost £9.99. It's all pocketbooks, but pocketbooks in a different dimension, I would say. P is also for play. What is your favorite play? I have no favorite play, I guess, but I studied when I was a student of English and American literature at the University of Aachen in Germany. I studied a lot of Harold Pinter. I read his plays like The Birthday Party. I remember that very well. And later I actually was so happy when he received the Nobel Prize for Literature. I saw and I adored an American play that I saw here in Stockholm when I was still a tourist and coming from Germany. That was in, my gosh, 1987 I was here, and I saw A Long Day's Journey into Night by Eugene O'Neill. And it was directed by a guy who was a pretty famous film director, you could say. His name was Ingmar Bergman, or Ingmar Bergman internationally. And on stage that evening of A Long Day's Journey into Night, which is Long Dag's Färd mot Natt in Swedish, were actors like Jarl Kulle, like Bibi Andersson, like Tommy Berggren, actors who also acted in Bergman's or Bergman's world-famous movies. That was a terrific night, and I still have a very special relationship to that play because of that night, because of that visit. P is for Paris. Oh my gosh. What is the last book you read set in Paris? I think Paris was actually my last trip abroad. That was in November of 2019, before a certain tiny little virus conquered the world. And but no particular book comes into my mind when I think about Paris now. I think, of course, of the song that, among other people, Dean Martin has crooned so beautifully. I think it's called April in Paris. Who did you run to, my love? Yeah, great. And a movie comes into my mind. Rachel Kushner is also a movie person. She's also thinking a lot about movies. I read that in her beautiful essays, The Hard Crowd, from 2020 that I finished 2 weeks ago. The movie that comes into my mind is Charade by Stanley Donen, with amazing Hollywood actors like the unforgettable Cary Grant, the wonderful, the charming Audrey Hepburn, actors like Walter Matthau, James Coburn, and George Kennedy are in that movie. And we have the mesmerizing music of Henry Mancini. Charade, a romantic thriller played in Paris, one of my favorite movies of all times. That comes into my mind. I would love to go to Paris again as soon as possible. P is for many countries. It's for Pakistan, it's for Peru, for Poland, for Portugal, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Palau and Paraguay, and Panama, right? Yeah, the Panama hat, actually, did you know that? Panama hats are called Panama hats, but they they're never made in Panama, but always made in Ecuador. But P, a country from P, some recommendations here. Yeah, I read, as I talked about in the non-fiction video that I filmed before this video, I read The 9 Lives of Pakistan by Declan Walsh, which I highly recommend. It's a book about 9 biographies of people, important people for the history of Pakistan, mostly in the 20th century and also in the 21st century. I read recently a book called Snow White and Russian Red, which is a part of the post-Soviet book club that I started. It was the 3rd novel that we read. Soon, November 1, comes the 4th novel. I will speak more about the post-Soviet book club in another video. P is for pandemic. Have you read any books about pandemics? Yes, I read pretty at the time when this pandemic hit Europe and hit the world, the big parts of the world. I read a book called The Last Day of October by Lawrence Wright, which is about a way worse pandemic than this one, because in Lawrence Wright's pandemic, in that novel, about 1/3 of the world population dies, and humankind is sort of threatened to extinction. It wasn't such a good book, actually, but the research that Wright has done is really good, but he's not such a great writer, a fiction writer. He's a good non-fiction writer, but not a great fiction writer, I think. That's my opinion. And another book that I read was The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donohue. She is an Irish-Canadian or Canadian-Irish author, and The Pull of the Stars plays actually out in 1917-18 during the pandemic that is often compared to this, our beautiful pandemic. It was called the Spanish flu in colloquial terms at that time, and this plays out in a hospital in Dublin, Ireland, among a couple of women. It's a beautiful, beautiful novel. P is for poetry. Do you have a favorite poem you can recite? I cannot recite the whole poem. When I studied English, I had to sort of read the poem and should be able to analyze it when I had my intermediate exams at the University of Aachen. So this one is still, the first lines are still with me. But I read it out to you now because it's one of the most beautiful poems of Romanticism written in the English language. And you have to guess the author. This goes, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continues as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flush upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Ooh, this is so beautiful. And this was written, of course, you have guessed it now, bing, 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 by William Wordsworth, one of the greatest romantic poets in Britain, in British literature. P is for politics. Do you enjoy political books? Yes, I do. I think that politics shape our lives. Politics, every day we are surrounded by politics. And I don't understand how people can be sort of apolitic, that they are not reading or studying politics, because everything that is around us is politics. When I go outside the door, somebody gets shot 450 meters from my house. This is politics. Because there is a criminal system, there is a system that doesn't work in the suburbs, and young people go into gangs and they start gang wars, and of course it's a mistake of politics, right? When I see the kindergarten children on the opposite house in the morning, it's politics if they have a good kindergarten. It's politics if the kindergarten gets the resources it needs to give those kids a good day and a good education in kindergarten. It's policy when I live in a new apartment and when the city of Stockholm is building thousands and thousands of new apartments to fulfill the need of the people of Stockholm. That is a decision made by politics. It's politics when I see or not see a Russian jet plane entering Swedish territory, which has happened a lot of times recently in the last couple of years. They're always touching it and then leaving just to provoke a little bit of reaction. I don't know. It's politics when I put on the TV and switch on the news and I see that Germany is about to get a new government and they're negotiating what things they are going to do. It's politics when I see that people have decided not to take climate change serious. We have all these floods, we have all these fires all over the world. That is politics. So yes, I'm interested in politics, and yes, I read books about politics because it's difficult, because it's important and necessary and essential to understand what is going around us as soon as we leave the house, but even as we are in our houses. P is for pages. How many pages do you read a week on average? My gosh, oops, that differs a lot. I cannot say that I read like 52 times a week, that's a year, 52 times so on such and such pages on average, because that can differ a lot. I mean, last week was a really good reading week. I finished 2 books. I read about, I would say, 450, 500 pages last week. This week has started okay by reading Heaven by Mieko Kawagami. Mieko, yeah. My reading Heaven has started quite good, and I also started another book. I don't know where I end up at the end of the week. But I also have bad weeks sometimes when I watch too much television, where I do other things that sort of irritate me or distract me from reading, and things that also belong to life, right? So when I'm in a reading slump, then I might get down to as low as 50 pages. And I don't see no more prompts here, so I can finish this video by taking off the Panama hat, P for Panama, by lifting it for you, my dear viewers. Thank you very much for viewing this video. Thank you very much for supporting my channel by subscribing it, by commenting on it, by liking the videos. And I hope that you stay tuned to the channel, but most of all, people, I want you to stay safe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.